Welcome back, beautiful people. I hope you've had a wonderful Monday and Tuesday so far. Today, I have for you everything you need to know for Game Week 9. We're looking at, is Haaland worth it? We're looking at the best premiums, Salah, Palmer, Saka, Son. We're looking at Spurs. We're looking at Man United. We're looking at the defenders. We're looking at Larsen or Cunha and so much more. Like I said, everything you need to know for Game Week 9. Before I tell you to subscribe, because I'm always looking out for your best interest, would be in your best interest, you can see on screen that Matt Sels has delivered an 11-pointer following a haul on Monday night and a very good performance, which has taken me up to 63k without a chip being used. So delighted with the start, obviously, hoping to kick on. And with a wildcard in the back pocket, who knows where we could take it before maybe even game week 19. Very interesting and exciting game weeks coming up. If you haven't subscribed already, please consider doing so, especially if you're in the 50% of people who watch regularly and haven't clicked the button. We're close to 4,000 subscribers, and if we could hit that before the end of the deadline, that would be absolutely magnificent. Thank you so much for all the support on the channel, especially the comments. They're so wonderful and quite wholesome. So read. Nothing else needs to be said, however, so let's hop into it. Okay, let's get started with the video, and we have to start with the main man. 3 blanks in a row. And in terms of the performances, they have not been particularly promising. I do not believe he's accumulated a single big chance in those 3 games that he's blanked in. So let's talk about him. I think we're going to do this in 3 ways. First, let's look at the windows of opportunities should you wish to dispense him. I see there being 2 primarily. Game week 10, Bournemouth away, and then game week 12, which is Spurs at home. Now, the thing with doing it in game week 10, and we're going to intertwine this with the positives, that you forego Brighton away. And not only do you forego Brighton away, but you forego that as a captaincy option. That is a pretty big deal, because if you look at the way that Brighton play, Hertzler is someone who is, I would say, one of the more positive managers. He likes his possession-based, fluid, fairly direct model, and he gives responsibilities to players. Now, where he gives responsibilities to players as opposed to a very heavy JDP model, which is more insistent on positional play, thus players are executing in a slightly more robotic manner as they're doing the same thing again and again, Pep model, then you're going to get more mistakes with the more freer, fluid, more personal responsibility model, right? Because you're just going to be encountering situations which you haven't done before, and in that freedom of expression, you're going to get some bits of brilliance, but you're also going to get the downside to that as well. So I could see City turning him over quite a lot and then being devastating on transition. And the thing is, not only does the game model from that aspect support City transitioning, but so does their overall game model in terms of space there is, the way they like to build. We look at their line relatively high, and they don't have the best centre backs for these type of recovery runs that are needed. For example, like a Mickey van der Ven. Lewis Dunk is going to struggle physically against Haaland. So I really like that fixture. And that's not to mention the fact that City won't have to be so pass in terms of shifting it horizontally to displace the block, right? And be so quick off the ball in terms of the other players. They can just leverage their own technical quality and cut through Brighton. So for me, in game week 11, he's such a good option. And that's one big thing putting me off. But then you look at game week 10. Okay, Bournemouth away. That week is a really good week to captain Salah, which we're going to touch on later. And again, who does he play? He plays Brighton. I think Brighton will just be someone who you never really want to play your defenders against because they could score, right? Or as in, it's not the most ideal fixture. But in terms of playing your attackers against them, I always fancy it. Even though Newcastle didn't score, they really should have, and they should have scored a couple, to be honest. That's that. And then in game week 10, like I said so many times, going away to Bournemouth is tough. Okay, and it'll be no different for him. He shouldn't have too much space in behind. I can't imagine, even if they are to press high, I think they'll get into a deep block relatively quick. They're a physical side, and City will have to be very sharp to essentially be able to cut them open. They'll go for you a little bit more than other sides, though, right? Because if you can beat their high press and they aren't too deep, then you're in business. It's just most sides don't have the technical quality to beat the high press consistently and be brave enough to do so. Whereas I wouldn't be surprised if City do that, especially if Rico Lewis continues playing, and then they have more players who can operate in the pockets in the second or third phase. The thing is, if he's going to play like at least one of Gundo Bernardo, which he will in the 80, probably it won't be the case where De Bruyne and Phil play in the middle. Then you have cover, you'll have Rico, you'll have Gundo or Bernardo who can all receive in that second, third phase and help progress from there. And then obviously you've got centre backs who are on the ball, Stones, Guardiola, Akanji, who are very competent in the first phase. So I think they'll do okay then. I still expect them to win. And I wouldn't be surprised to see them do well. It's just not the best fixture in the world considering their physicality and they're good overall defensively. As Arsenal showed, right, you need a certain level of creativity and cutting edge passing just to get through. Then the other option is game week 12 where it's like Spurs and it's like Liverpool, then it's like Forest, and I think there's Villa mixed in there somewhere as well. And that's not particularly great. The counter argument would be okay, but Spurs' system is quite exploitable for him. Liverpool at least is some form of a high line, although he doesn't have a good record and it's not the greatest. Forest, sure, they're looking like one of the best defenses in the league at the moment, which we're going to talk about. But he still should be good enough to deal with them. But then on the other side, you've got very physical centre backs in Murillo, Milankovic. You've got a very physical team as well. I wouldn't be surprised to see them struggle, even though it is at home, because I think Nuno goes very deep and he blocks him and takes up a lot of Haaland space, as we're going to talk about when we come to the tactical side of things. So that's the positives and negatives intertwined in terms of the windows to offload them. Now let's go on to tactics. I have said so many times in the past that the best way to stop Manchester City is to stop Haaland, and the best way to do that is to play a five at the back. Thomas Tuchel, the guy who stifled Pep Guardiola about 3 times in one season over the course of a few months and went to win a Champions League and FA Cup final as well. He played that system, and of course he had N'Golo Kante in the middle, which helps things. Even though you remain so compact, you still cover so much space so quickly without getting dragged and creating giving opportunities to the opposition to create pockets. Okay, so now teams are starting to employ that. They're starting to go five at the back, crowd him, give him no space in behind where he thrives. Okay, and don't engage in a game where there's a lot of transition. Just sit a little bit deep and occupy him with us three. If you want to try and drift into the channels, there's always someone there. We don't need to get dragged out. That's the thing with playing a back two, right? You play a back two, and it's pretty much one-on-one each time, and you have to follow him. If he goes into the channel, if he goes into that left half space that he loves so much, you have to follow him, and that creates pockets for other people, and you're in a physical battle with him. Over here, because you're deeper, and you have three, there is no shifting of the centre-backs. If he goes to the left half space, you just get the guy on your right to deal with him. So that's what teams are employing, and it's working really well. Now, let's look at a couple of things before we talk about no creative and lower circulation. So I thought I'd start adding some visuals into my content, and as opposed to the graphic type of statistic tables that most other people do, this channel's not really focused around that. So I thought I'd just do some tactical analysis within the picture. Obviously, I've given you a lot about the five at the back already. You look how compact that block is and how little space he has to operate. City put in a huge volume of crosses against Wolves, and that's something they'll have to do repeatedly against these slides that block deep. And as more and more sides come to approach this method, it's going to be difficult for him because the quality of delivery is lacking to an extent when there's no Kevin De Bruyne, especially pulling out from that right side, or even the left side when he played with Grealish against West Ham. Now, one thing I mentioned on the other side was how the slower circulation ball is actually negatively impacting him in a big way. And that's more to do with Rodri, right? The thing I noticed with Rodri is he speeds everything up because he's almost like this. He is a pivot, right? But he's like one of those tennis balls things that you play in the garden. He just keeps going around and around, and he can go from side to side so quick. He can hit with the switches, short passes, medium length passes, breaking line passes. He's so good at that, right? And having that and having someone who's a bit more dynamic in the eights as opposed to just Silva or Gundo just speeds everything up overall. It allows you to create and find pockets and then dismantle the block in that way. And then you can at least feed Haaland like that, right? I remember once in the first half, Rico Lewis got some space into the right side, and all of a sudden space freed up to Haaland, and that was all done by the rest of the team. But not having that is a pretty big deal because then you rely on crosses as opposed to infiltrating through the middle, and crosses are going to be difficult to find him because he's got to deal with everyone else, and also the ball has to be so accurate to find just him and be looking for him. So that's a few things, and you saw how Wolves, who have struggled somewhat this season, actually did well with this approach. And then on the flip side, here you have a game against West Ham. This is his third goal for the hat-trick. There was a lot of space in behind. West Ham in the first half were willing to engage in a game where there were more transitions. City used their carrying power in De Bruyne in the middle to exploit that, and obviously in this goal, lower space in behind was exploited. One good pass, and you're through, bang, and he scores because his finishing has overall been very, very good this season. So I think just less and less sides will play this, and unless you see this like you will against Brighton, there isn't the absolute need to captain him. And that's why fixture analysis, I think, is so important. That's why I spent some more time on this section. This is why you can't just be like, okay, Bournemouth away is bad, Spurs at home is supposedly bad on the FDR. We may as well just sell him. It's just 1 week against Brighton. No, he's such a good player that if he gets these conditions, he's going to exploit them heavily. There's no reason he can't score a hat-trick. Spurs will also provide these conditions. Yes, they have very good players, and they're in pretty decent form overall, but he himself, it's a good matchup for him. So I thought I'd just give you a wider scope of what I was thinking. In terms of what I'm going to be doing, I'll save that for my team selection video, but the argument would be to really exploit the upside to the likes of Watkins and Palmer, because that's who you'd essentially be replacing, right? Haaland is a cheap cheap midfielder pretty much, right? For a Haaland and a Palmer and Watkins. And now I'm going to show you with the premiums what I think about them and whether that's justifiable, because it's not just the Haaland side. Should we sell him? Well, who are we buying and is it worth it? So we must look at both sides of the coin. But before we hop into the premiums, we should talk about Spurs, and we'll of course talk about one premium being Heung-min Son. I'm not sold, but should you be selling? And when I say selling, I'm referring to one asset in particular, and that actually is Dominic Solanke, because I'm still not convinced by the ceiling, and less so by the floor now with the performances I'm seeing. I've spoken about this repeatedly. I don't think he looks that sharp, and even if Spurs are going to create a decent number of instances where he could score, if he's just not going to be in the form to score, like Dominic Calvert-Lewin, then okay, maybe we need to reconsider. I think also another thing you need to do is have a very accurate perception of the quality of the player. You look at the guy at Bournemouth and you think, oh, this guy scores so Bournemouth, and he went for 65 million, and Andrew really likes him. He's guaranteed to do really well. Well, I was one who thought that maybe, actually no, not maybe, I definitely thought this move was overpriced by about 15 to 20 mil. I think he's more of a 45 million pound striker. So when I'm viewing him through that lens. The other thing is, I knew that at Bournemouth, the game model in general amplified some of his strengths. Whereas here, he has to do things which he didn't have to do at Bournemouth, and it's not his game particularly. I think at Bournemouth, he acted as a bit of a magnet within the zone, whereas here he has to be a lot more technical actions away from just the centre backs, just in order for Spurs to function particularly well. And I don't think he's as competent in these type of areas, and it's what the game model and the top sides requires. So that's just another thing to consider. Let's do some fixture analysis, then we'll talk about the rest of the players and Son after. Well, Palace isn't really a game for wingers, right? You saw against Forest, it wasn't really a game where Forest made too many chances, but when they did, it was pretty much all set pieces and all crosses into Wood. Wood easily could have had a hat-trick. Whereas how many times did you see Cho or Elanga get into really good position? Sure, they definitely helped with progression. Sure, they carried pretty well. They made some inroads inside after carrying. But in terms of actually getting clear-cut chances, it wasn't really there for them. And then when you consider Spurs' wingers are, in general, very wide, and I wouldn't allow yourself to look at the last game and think, oh, no, they're not. We'll come on to that, because West Ham were absolutely all over the place. So who is this a game for? More so the Kulusevskis, maybe the Madisons, if he even starts now, and the Solankes. But Solanke isn't in the greatest form, and Palace are at home. And it's always somewhat of a difficult place to go. So I wouldn't mind selling a Solanke if you wanted to go to like a Cunha now. I think you've lost your best fixture already, joint best fixture, and therefore this one isn't great. Villa's definitely not going to be too good either. Yeah, short Ipswich and 11, but 11's somewhat far away, and you can obviously get money out of him. So that's just something. If you had the likes of Brennan Johnson, Kulusevski, I'd just be keeping. In terms of Madison, I think just hope he doesn't get benched, because I struggle to see a world where Kulusevski gets dropped, just because he offers you so much in midfield, especially off the ball, right? He's very, very intelligent, very good up there in terms of when to press, how to press, move, block space. He's just an intelligent player. He's also very robust in the duel, more so than Madison. So I can't really see his expected minutes going down too much. Then Villa, what happens if they build slow, right? Which they have done so against Man United, and the whole game just drops in speed. Well, Spurs have less transitional opportunities, which is what they thrive on, as we saw against West Ham, to a fairly decent extent. Son is good of an asset then. Is Brennan Johnson as good of an asset then? I don't think so. I don't think you really want a game where Brennan Johnson's on the right-hand side having to engage in so many small space combinations. I think you just want an up and down game where he can find some space in behind so that he can shoot and get into shooting positions. Ipswich is great. I don't take anything away from. More so, the fixtures before and after, are they really worth having to potentially hold through just for that one? But let's move on to Heung-min Son. Now, I'm going to show you a graphic of an instance against West Ham, which is his goal. And I would like you to look at something. Is that something that is going to be replicated in other games? No, not really, because most sides, if not all sides, will not be this open. Maybe Ipswich side in the near future for them. And in general, an Ange number nine, a left winger isn't going to get in these type of positions and find themselves in these type of instances because they're not a Klopp-like winger. So let's move on to that and see it. Now, this is a ridiculous position for any defense in the world to concede, let alone a Premier League defense. They lose the ball in midfield, and he's left one-on-one just after the halfway line. Like, come on, it's not good enough, and that isn't going to happen because sides aren't going to build like this. They won't be so naive. They won't be so slow in the middle. They'll have better dueling capacity. They'll be more aggressive in the middle. They have better level of physicalities in the middle. This just won't happen, right? And if it does, it's a very rare occurrence, and you'll be very lucky to get this twice. And what's more likely to happen is what I saw for the Basuma goal for those who watched the game. He was wide. The block was fairly deep. It was compact. He played the ball inside into Udogie. He was running through that left half space, and then Udogie pulled it back into the Basuma, who was in a better position because his central players in general are going to be in a better position, and even the fullbacks to an extent. And that's what I'm going to expect more from Son. Of course, he can do well because of what a top player he is, right? But I just don't think you can be really looking at that ceiling with as much conviction of getting there as you can with pretty much any of the other premiums. And talking about the other premiums, let's move on to them now. So not only do I not like Son that much in terms of isolation due to his fixtures, role, and price, but I love two of the other premiums who I think could prove stellar value, even at their prices and relative levels and different levels of popularity. Before we go on to them, there is one premium, half premium, you could argue, who is not on there, and that is Phil Foden. For those of you who own him like me, it is the simplest conundrum in the world. You hold him. It is Southampton at home. You categorically cannot sell him before Southampton. Even unless you get a clear-cut leak that he's benched, even still, he might not even be a sell in that spot. And it's not something I'm going to explore because are we going to get a leak? Probably not. Even though it's at 3 o'clock, probably not. Maybe Tony will come through for us on Twitter or Maiden, but like I said, probably not. Unless you get something absolutely clear, that is the easiest hold in the world. And then we can assess afterwards. In terms of planning for him down the line, I can't do that exactly because I don't know what's going to happen against Southampton. If he starts, he'll probably do well. And will I really want to sell him after that? Because will Pep bench him again? Probably not. I know the reasons for him benching him. He wants a bit of height in the side. He wants a bit more control without Rodri and De Bruyne. Okay, cool. I get it. But I think he starts Foden against Southampton. And as a result, let's just see how it plays out, and then we can assess from after that. Now let's move on to the three big boys in midfield, Son aside. We've got Saka here, right, who's a issue for a lot of people. Now, I don't think he's going to play because he's clearly been lying about how close he was for Bournemouth. He clearly never had a chance. He's not playing this Champions League game, and they've looked really poor without him. So I think he'll do everything he can to get him there, but I don't think he'll be there if he hasn't trained yet. Because is it really worth giving him that one game on the off chance he gets a really serious injury and then he's out for a prolonged period of time, especially when Odegaard's out and it's a hamstring, so it's a more delicate area of the body in terms of footballers getting injured? Is it worth it? Probably not. So I think Saka misses out, and therefore he's an automatic sell. Even if he does start, potentially reduce expected minutes for sure, around 70, 75. So you're losing that over the likes of Salah and Palmer, and in this case, Son. You're also getting Newcastle away, Chelsea away, which isn't great. And even Forest after that. Sure, it's at home, but still Forest. You know how high I am on Forest. I'll speak about them in a little bit. Not the best, really not the best. And then he acts as a blocker to the big boys as well. I don't think you can do that. I think he's just a sell. I think he's a pure sell this week. Then it comes on to the two guys that I think are so far above the rest. Palmer and Salah, particularly Salah. For me, numero uno. The way this guy is playing is an absolute joke. And before we get onto him and why he's so good as an asset and as a player, he's actually a really good opportunity because, as I've mentioned many times, Wildcard 6, they just don't have him. Even if they're not on Wildcard 6, Wildcard 4, just generally, any wildcard, they don't have him. And that is a beautiful opportunity to exploit, especially when you consider what I told you earlier about Brighton being exploitable and he has them at home in 10 and Haaland travels away to Bournemouth. Well, now it's a double whammy because captain him against the Haaland captains really, really well. So there's that from a strategic standpoint. The thing about this guy, which makes him unsellable to me, is the actual volume of potential instances where something could potentially happen. It's in decent proximity or in a decent position. They're not that high. And it's even lower for those actual instances. I thought Bournemouth was the only game where I've seen it. He had a lot of chances. But even Man United, his biggest haul of the season, 2 assists out of pure quality. Pure quality. A brilliant cross. His usage of the outside of the foot, the way he created separation, the way he handled the whole situation in terms of decision making, timing of the pass, the weight of the pass. He's not operating from a really huge sample of chances like Haaland has done, for example, in the past where City made him loads. He's just being utterly efficient at a ruthless level. And honestly, maybe in these type of games where the other attack is a little bit better, they open up a bit more and he gets more of these actual instances. And if he does, with the form he's in, he's going to hurt you. He's going to hurt you bad. I think the games in Game Week 10, Brighton is really nice. I think Villa is a decent one. If they go a little bit quicker with their build-up compared to United, I think down that flank, especially when Digne pushes on, transition or even just general turnovers, if they get caught in the middle Villa, then I think Salah could really hurt them. Then obviously you've got Southampton away after that lovely fixture. And even also away this week, I think one, Calafiori might be injured, but if not, he's got the beating of him 1v1. There's no Saliba. There's no Saka. I don't think Arsenal will be able to dominate territory particularly well. I don't think that they'll be able to sustain themselves brilliantly well. Slower game mode in general probably encourages them to keep the ball. And if they are to control it with how good Salah is in those just one-off instances, just bang in a game, just to hurt you there and then in a moment out of nowhere, I like his chances this week as well. And I think that there's going to be no one who can match his floor. And especially with penalties as well, so useful. So for me, I'd be very careful to fade it. And I would just try and get him. I wouldn't say break your structure for him, but create a plan and prioritize Mohamed Salah. That is what I would say. I would go for a middling ground here. Whilst I don't really like the Son pick, and I love the Salah pick, I'm in the middle on Palmer, closer to him being more preferable. And in an ideal world, where we're going to talk about structures later, you have Haaland, Saka, and Palmer. But to actually get this right now is largely inaccessible to a lot of people because you need a lot of transfers to facilitate things and move things around and downgrade here and there, etc. Okay, so I wouldn't say he's essential, but I think the fixtures are okay. I don't think they're great. I don't think they're bad. I think they're okay. And I think they're largely open to interpretation. We'll come on to Newcastle in a second because there's a bit of analysis for them on the next slide with another graphic. Arsenal will not be easy because they're going to go to Chelsea. Imagine it will be the typical Arteta away performance in terms of how his philosophy manifests on the pitch. Very, very difficult to beat. Very robust. Very deep. Trying to kill you on transition and the usual game model you've seen from them away from home. United's and look, they're the best defensive side in the country, right? Obviously, they've had a rough week or so, but they're still the best defensive side in the country. United, yeah, it's all on offer there for Palmer. But the only thing is, when it's sandwiched in between Newcastle and Arsenal, I think you have to lower the rating of that fixture because you combine them and you look at it as a whole as opposed to just one. And then the other thing is, it is United. And as bad as they can be, you just never know what you're going to get at Old Trafford. I still expect Palmer to do very well. But when you account for the group and the fact that it's sandwiched in between, it makes it less appealing because you're not buying him for one fixture, right? Now let's go on to Newcastle, which is a fixture this week. And let's just do something. Very briefly, this is a snapshot of them defending deep against City. What they did against City was they went man-to-man high, and then they blocked low in a 5-4-1, which they transitioned into from their man-to-man press. Now, Eddie Howe did a very good job of learning how to make City's life a lot more difficult. And coincidentally, it was Arteta's game before where he used a 6-3 shape, which City really struggled with against, and he copied something quite similar to that. Now, against Chelsea did a couple of things very well against Liverpool. Firstly, they progressed very well in the first half against Liverpool, so I imagine he will look to cut the circulation right at its roots from the pivot, essentially. Sure, it was the centre backs, but a lot of it was coming from the pivot. So I think he blocks that in some capacity there. I think personally he'll go quite aggressive. He'll go man-to-man high again and push everyone up the pitch. But then, given he's got a team of absolute workhorses, I mean, Foden, Ali, Bruno, Joelinton, like, they will work for you. Murphy will that front, like that five, excluding Isak, and Isak works well. They will work for you. So he will be able to transition back into a 4-5-1, 5-4-1, pretty easily or relatively easily. And what will he look to do? Similar to what Liverpool did. Make Palmer's life very difficult, very compact in the middle, close off his space. And if he wants the ball, okay, he can go outside of the block and he can go and collect it from that deep right-hand side pocket. Okay, fine, he can't hurt us that much from there, right? And I think that's what they're going to do. And therefore, I don't think it's the best fixture for him, especially when you consider the dueling capacity of the midfield and how aggressive it is. And the fact that, like, Gordon's good off the ball as well. So even if he wants to link with Madueke, it's not like Madueke is going to be able to get the fullback one-on-one too often, right? Like, I say too often because he'll get in there, but like compared to other games you would have. So for me, it's not the best fixture, and thus I wouldn't mind fading. I think it's preferable to have him because he can still do well for all of the obvious reasons. He's such a good player, but I just wanted to give you the flip side where you understood what you potentially could get, and it's on the end of the world to have him and keep a Foden or a Son. And then look to bring him in 12. But if you'd like him, then the conditions are there, especially with Man United. And Arsenal look a little bit rope. They look like they're on the ropes a little bit at the moment. So who knows? That could continue for a few weeks, and then Palmer could certainly have his way. It's also the type of fixture I feel like Palmer would be really up for Arsenal at home. Both sides presented to you. Choose what is best for you, but I'm following Sels' brilliant haul and Pickford's clean sheet. And in general, we had a bit of a discussion about moving to Pickford last week. People are starting to look at Henderson and think, when can I get rid of him? People are also looking at Raya and thinking about Saliba with these fixtures coming up. I am in a position where I can get rid of him. Should I? Look, for me, it's Sels or Pickford. I don't think you can go wrong with picking either one. You pick them, you stick with them, and you just enjoy the points. I can't imagine they do badly compared to the rest of the field. I think they'll do very well compared to the rest of the field. In terms of Henderson, I don't like his fixtures coming up for clean sheet prospects. I think they'll concede in pretty much all of them. So, yeah, if you're in a position to sell, I would absolutely do so. With Raya, I think it's tough because, sure, do I think they're going to concede against Liverpool? Yes. Do I think they'll concede away at Newcastle? Maybe. Do I think they'll concede away at Chelsea? Yes. But it's also the type of game where he could get a big haul. So it's like you're foregoing a decent amount of upside. I think it's a really nice way to get some cash out there. So if you are looking to upgrade elsewhere and you're looking to, at Raya and thinking, oh, double Arsenal, couldn't assume you have Gabriel. It's a nice way to hop off, and I quite like this goalkeeper transfer. I'm not really for it, but when these two are so far ahead of the rest, I think it's worth it. There's no reason Sales and Pickford can't get hauls this week. Fulham and Leicester have both got good enough attacks, but not too good attacks, whereby the clean sheet probability hasn't gone down too much, but the save potential has gone up enough where it's like, okay, they could get a haul, not just a clean sheet, but a haul. And one haul from a goalkeeper, actually two. Two hauls from a goalkeeper is like 20 plus points. That's like 3 clean sheets for someone to catch up on whilst they still a lot. That's a lot. Like, I think if Sels gets one more haul, he becomes the highest scoring goalkeeper and he outscores all defenders in the game. That's ridiculous. I don't even think he needs a haul. I think he needs like a 7-pointer. That's how good I think these keepers could be at 4.5. Pickford's just hitting his stride in terms of point scoring. The highest scoring goalkeeper last year. Don't underestimate Sean Dyche as a coach, as so many have done. A very, very good defensive coach, and you can expect them to do well. So I'm all for it, to be honest. Not usually for it, but I'm all for it this time. We'll talk about the structure first, because the forwards is pretty long to talk about. Look, it just ties in with what I said earlier. I still think 3 is Salah, Palmer, Haaland is my ideal. If you can't get there now, no worries. I think you should prioritize, or you probably have Haaland. I think you should prioritize Salah, and then Palmer maybe in a few weeks, and then have like a Watkins who is benched, so he's rested, or a Foden for now, or a Son, of course. In terms of the mids and forwards, I think facilitate that type of premium structure with the 3 cheap mids or forwards. Well, just lock, absolutely lock. I advise someone to wildcard without him, and the team actually did pretty well. just saying. But in most cases, you're not. So yeah, Lock played really well again tonight and looked very dangerous in terms of output as well. And then you can just get one of the cheap forwards, which is listed above. Maybe you could have 2. Maybe you can have another cheap mid like a McNeil, a ESR, a Smith Rowe, some menu. There's so many, right, that are pretty good. Even Garnacho's coming into the fold, who we're going to talk about. Slightly more expensive, 6.2, but still ish, knocking around that price point. So you've got the facilitators, you've got the enablers, and you've got abundance of them. And then defensively, I think very, very simple. 1 4.0, 2 4.5s minimums, and and then one 6.0, and then so you can actually see what I was doing there. And then in terms of the last one, that can be like a Guardiola/Gabriel, it can be a Porro, or it can be another 4.5 that you rotate with the other two. Absolutely no problem. And the 6.0 will be one of Guardiola or Gabriel. For me, Trent, it's just too expensive, right? Like you saw against Chelsea, he barely had any chances to get attacking returns. I'm sure not every game of Chelsea, not every game will be that hard, not just in terms of open play threat, but also in sheet probabilities. But like Villa, Brighton, even Southampton, they've all got goals in them, and then obviously Arsenal and City either side of it. So for me, whilst I think you can get some attacking returns in those, I wouldn't be persistent with him for too much longer, especially if you need the cash elsewhere, which, let's be honest, you probably do, because we all do. That's my thoughts around the structure. Okay, look, there are so many forwards to talk about because there are so many good ones. I could literally spend an hour talking about all of these in depth, but I'm not going to do that. I will give a quick summary of all of them. We will leave Cunha, Strand, Larsen to the end. I think Wood's just going to continue. There's no reason for him not to. He's not a channel running striker where he's looking to create space for others to run off him and find pockets. He's someone who's very much stationed in the middle, similar-ish to how Watkins is now and how Emery's transformed him. The system is designed so that the chances by default fall at his feet because it's not inviting Morgan Gibbs White to constantly run off him. It's inviting Morgan Gibbs White when he isn't not injured to carry from deep, to help progress, to link, and then eventually to find Wood. Same with the wingers, crosses, and just in general, it's not like a 4-3-3, it's more of a 4-2-3-1. Just think about where the wingers are stationed and what their actions are going to be. They're not going to be like a top winger where they're penetrating those half spaces consistently, getting beyond the last line. They're going to be more creative and, again, bringing the ball up. So it's all going through Wood in the end, and I think brilliant option. Team playing so well, good coach, feel good factor, good minutes, penalties, all for it. DCL, I think you can keep him. I think the fixtures are so good, you can still keep him. I also think you can sell. I think if you're fed up and you're like, okay, this guy's missed so many chances, I don't think he's going to get his form up to a point where he can justify the spot. And that's the thing, justify the spot, because there's so much competition banging on the door at a very similar price that is really doing the business. I mean, Larsen and Cunha doing the business, Wood's doing the business, Welbeck's doing the business, Jimenez is doing the business, Whistle was doing the business before. So it's basically just him, right? So I think you can sell Vissa. I think, yeah, we'll probably only get like 60-ish minutes this week, but the next 5 are really solid from an attacking standpoint. So, and Kevin Schade hasn't been impressive at 9, so I'm all for him. Welbeck, personally, I would still avoid. I don't love the fixtures. João Pedro is going to come back soon-ish as well, and that will eat into his minutes when, you know, he goes to 9 and Ruud to continue to play the 10. He's also on the older side now as well, right? So can't play 90 every single game. So that's something to consider. I wouldn't go him, but so far on the other 4, I'm fairly bullish. Diesel, a little bit different. Jimenez looks so sharp. Wow. So sharp. And again, you wanted to go there. I don't think anyone can tell you you're wrong because he looks brilliant. And with Pereira missing and Jimenez good record, I think he'll get penalties now as well. So another thing. And yeah, like the system probably isn't as optimized for him as it is Wood, but it's still very, very decent that aspect. Playing a 4-2-3-1 as well, and so it's not too far off. And I have nothing negative to say about him. The big one is Cunha versus Strand Larsen, and it's very, very challenging. I think with Cunha, you get penalties, you get set pieces, you get probably slightly better minutes, and you get a higher quality of player. So in those instances where you need to deliver, I would always back him over Strand Larsen just because he's a better player. With Strand Larsen, you arguably get better positioning given he's an out-and-out 9. He's not going to float and play off the left and have to come in behind. He's not also going to do or have the progressive and ball-carrying responsibilities, nor the creative responsibilities to an extent that Cunha is going to have. And he's cheaper. So it's very, very close. I don't think you can go wrong. For me, my gut just tells me go with the quality of Cunha. Go with the quality of Cunha. Go with the fundamentals of Cunha. Because I think when you're paying a cheap price, paying $1 million more and getting all of that is justifiable. So I think it's close, but I would go Cunha. That being said, I still like Larsen. And the fixtures are magnificent, right? So you want to go there, all over it. In terms of the expensive options, Watkins has been absolutely gone. He's been so good for owners. I still think at the moment I prefer Havertz and Jackson just because they're cheaper and there is enough money that needs to be spent elsewhere, right? Watkins has been great though, and I think the fixture run from 12 is really nice. Even this week, right? Like Bournemouth at home, really, really solid, and he's well rested. Then you've got Spurs away, which I think he'll do well in. So I think he's going to rack up points. It's just I think the combination of points when you spread the funds could be better. But in isolation, what a brilliant asset. Jackson, when those fixtures swing, or even against Man United, I think I could be there. Actually, even now, considering he's a forward and he's not too expensive, I think I could be there. Havertz, he still had a decent amount of chances to score today, even though Arsenal got real creativity issues without Saka and Odegaard. And whilst I don't like Newcastle or Chelsea away, I really like the run off. I really like the run after for a long time, for like 15 weeks, I think it was. So I think he's a hold in the short term if you've got other issues. If you would like to be a little bit aggressive and move off for Newcastle away, Chelsea away, and Forest, by all means, and then bring him back after, yeah, I think that's cool. And some way to get some money for a few weeks, I think that's okay. But I would be getting him back in because that fixture run is good for quite a while. And then how many should we have of those cheap forwards? I think minimum one because they offer such good value. But having two, having like a Cunha and Wood is absolutely fine. Two fun like a Salah, Palmer, Haaland on the assumption that you're not too high on Havertz. I think Watkins is so expensive that you understand bypassing him. Jackson doesn't have a super high ceiling. I know he's hauled big, but I still don't trust his ceiling immensely given his finishing. Whereas I think Havertz has a little bit of is probably in the middle ground where I fancy him to do so. And with Trossard missing the penalty, I think he'll be on penalties with Saka out. So it's more so, do you want him and maybe an Isak? And if not, then you can just definitely go for two of the cheap options, and they will do very well for you. I think this feels like one long video, and I'm recording it like what is it, 2:43 a.m. now. So I don't mind that this is the last slide. Okay, now we will do the same with the defenders. I've already spoken about. To be fair, I've spoken about a lot of these guys. So it won't be anywhere near as long. But Trent, like I said, I think you like him for 10 and 12, 10, 2, 12. I think you can get some clean sheets, maybe one there max, but you can get attacking returns, which is nice. However, I think it's a luxury. I think it's a great way to get cash out, move it elsewhere. Vodio is looking like the old Vodio, and therefore he becomes seriously dangerous. I think he'll be practically fixture proof and brilliant, brilliant asset. I have nothing negative to say. Because he's at 6, you can justify him, right? Can you justify him over Gabriel? Maybe. Maybe for the next 3 weeks whilst they're a bit shaky. Maybe even Forest as well. You can just get Gabriel out and then get Gabriel in afterwards. Because even if he is to score, without clean sheets, it won't hurt too bad given the change to the bonus system. So I don't mind it. I'm a lot more open to the idea than I initially was. Pinnock, I think the next 5 fixtures are really solid, and he's a huge box threat. I have a soft spot for him because he always does well for me, and he's been scoring, right? He scored 2 recently. So very, very solid option and a great one to bring in this week. Nori, I'd prefer to bring him in just because I think Brighton score. But if you bring him in this week, not the end of the world. I don't think you'll get anything. Maybe an attacking return. Actually, it's a good game to get an attack, but I don't think you'll get anything defensively. However, Palace at home, Southampton at home, 10 and 11, definitely clean sheets on offer. And then Milenkovic and Mikalenko, similar to their keepers. One thing, Milenkovic plays Leicester this week. He's a 5 monster, and if you look at the change in the stats from when Milenkovic came and after he came and before he came, yeah, there's a huge disparity in pretty much all of them because of how much of a presence he's been, how much of a no-nonsense defender he's been as well. So the reason I brought that up is Leicester are poor at defending set pieces. Statistics prove that even from last season, that's carried on. So there's a haul for you there. You wanted a matchup, there's a haul for you there. And at 4.5, and another way into the Forest defense sells aside if you want to go Pickford, then you can. Mikalenko at 4-3, what more do you want? That fixture run, that coach, that side, what more do you want? The main reason I bring up Man United is because the fixtures are good and there's 4 assets in particular, I think. Not Rashford, because if he's playing on the right, I worry about his goal threat, and also his expected minutes always seem to be worse than Garnacho when they're both fit. But Garnacho's shown his open play goal threat over quite a long period of time now. At 6.2 million, there's value there. I like it. I have nothing negative to say about it because he's shown the quality. I'm big on that. Picking players, not just who have the fundamentals, but also who actually have the quality. And some of you will argue I misstepped with detail, and you know what? Fair enough. Maybe I did. Maybe I was too generous in my assessment of him. But Garnacho is one that, regardless of the outcome, I won't be wrong about because he has the quality and he's shown it recently. And then you see the chance that Dallo got played in for, that could have been a goal, and then people would have been talking about him. it licks the big box, right? And not always is going to rack up saves with United's game model and defend. So you've got 3 defensive assets there that all have high upside, and I think there was some consideration for some people if you are looking to go a little bit different. That is all she wrote. As you can see, it has been a fantastic start to the season. So if you would like to catch the analysis constantly, that has been helping that, and some of the luck, to make sure to subscribe. I hope you enjoyed. I have no idea how long that one was, but I imagine it was pretty long. So I look forward to editing it now. It's just before 3 a.m. and you'll have it in 5 hours. I shall see you very shortly, or tomorrow, for the team selection video. In the meantime, have a brilliant day and make sure to make it a great day.